You're listening to the Cross-Check NHL show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clarke.
Welcome to the Cross-Check NHL show. I am Andrew Berkshire. I'm here with Mary Clarke from For the Win. Of course, I am from Game Over Montreal and the Montreal Gazette. We have a fun show for you today. We're going to wrap up our final thoughts on the Beijing Winter Olympics because those are finally over, which means I'm sleeping at night. Mary doesn't have to wake up super early to do this podcast anymore, so there'll be less of the talking in low tones and over and over again as we clear the morning fog out of our brains. We've got to talk about the resurgence of Caufield. Caufield has returned with the hiring of Martin St. Louis. And then there's some trades that are starting to trickle in as we get closer to the trade deadline. We're a month away now. It feels like we're not that far away because usually it's passed by now. The season's just extended, and I don't think people realize yet that we're going to be talking regular season hockey until the very end of April. And of course, we've got our pop culture roulette segment to talk about at the end of the show. But before we get into all that, Mary, how was your weekend? I know that you got to play a lot of video games.
Yeah, that's all I did. So I have watched zero hockey since Friday started, and as we record Monday, I'm back to work. So I'll pick back up into work, but I've not watched any hockey. I heard a bit about the end of the Olympics, which we're going to talk about. But I had a very great weekend of playing video games and being away from social media after a ridiculous 2 weeks. Andrew, I mean, you've had you had to adjust your sleep schedule. I worked a whole ton. So I think now, this was, at least for me, it was a great weekend to just relax, not do anything other than play video games and just, take a mental health reset, essentially, because we worked ourselves really hard over the last couple of weeks through the Olympics. So I think, we're both doing good. At least it seems like you are. You're here, you're awake at, a normal time for a normal human being. So,
yes, it's been a while since I've been awake at 1 p.m., which is when we're recording this. So there are some things, of course, that as it comes out on Tuesday will have already happened as we look forward to them. But yeah, I am awake. I feel like I have more energy than I've had in a little bit where I'm not just fueled by caffeine. Not that I'm not, drinking things that have caffeine in them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going through as much as I was. And as I told Mary before we started the show, my first sleep at a regular time, I ended up in the morning with just a ridiculous cluster headache of caffeine denial, I guess, or withdrawal.
And it's always the worst
bad
when you wake up with a headache. Like you go to bed and you're fine, and then you wake up with a headache. I had that too a handful of times during the Olympics, and I was like, this sucks. What's going on here? So thankfully, it seems like both of our sleep schedules have readjusted. We did it. We emerged from, the end of a really busy time for both of us. So, I mean, it's going to still be busy because you're right. The trade deadline is a month away, and that's coming up quick. And there's still, a lot of hockey still to be played, and which we're going to talk about in this episode. So it's, good stuff. I'm excited and rested, and sleep helps, I think is what we're saying here. Sleep definitely helps.
Yeah, I mean, sleep is what we all thrive on, essentially, right? Yeah, I'm excited to get back to a regular schedule. I feel like it's going to be easier to talk about things and be in the know of things. While covering the Olympics, I felt like I was always behind, because when you're sleeping through the whole day, every day I would wake up at around 4 to get up and go get the kids from daycare. And I just had an avalanche of notifications and things that I had to check. And I just felt like I was always super behind on things that were going around in the NHL. So it's nice to actually be in a situation where we know what's happening. And speaking of that, we're going to do our last touch on the Winter Olympics before we get into the NHL. And really the only thing that happened since the last time we spoke that's hockey related was the gold medal game. And everybody expected going into these Olympics that the Russian Olympic Committee, which don't even get me started on the stupidity of that whole situation, would take gold because they had the most talent available to them. You know, the KHL is the second best league in the world after the NHL. However, the Finnish men pulled it off, and hey, Finland slays the dragon, wins their first gold medal in Olympic hockey. Fantastic story. After, you know, in 2009, the Finnish Hockey Federation essentially revamped the entire way that they do everything in the sport. And if you look back, not just in the Olympics, but in every essentially major sporting or hockey tournament, the Finns have done incredibly well over the last decade. They've been prioritizing skill more than, you know, the whole like grindy thing that they've been known for over the last 20 years or so. And it's paid off. It's paid major dividends. You look at the rise of Finnish stars in the NHL as well. I mean, Alexander Barkov is one of the best in the league. It's incredible what Finland is able to do with the population of, like, what is Finland's population? It's even smaller than Sweden. Like, a small Canadian province. Yeah, 5.5 million. Fewer people in Finland than in Toronto. Fewer people in Finland than in the province of Quebec. Like, they're an absolutely incredible country as far as hockey goes. And yeah, half the population of Sweden. Like, unbelievable what they're able to do. So hats off to Finland.
Came away with a women's bronze medal, which, you know, isn't anything to, you know, sleep on either. Like, I mean, I know USA Canada is oftentimes, you know, the big prize and stuff like that, but like winning bronze,
Finland's a clear number 3, like, and they have been for a while. Yeah, they're the ones that are pushing things forward for the rest of the group, we'll say.
Yeah, they had a really good Olympics overall, and I watched none of that game. I checked the score while I was, you know, relaxing, hanging out with my friends, doing, you know, chill stuff, not looking at social media. But I did check the score, and I was very pleased to see that, you know, Finland won. Like, it, you know, their celebration at the end was, you know, fantastic. You could see that this really matters to them, and I know people are going to come back with, you know, this gold medal doesn't mean anything. It wasn't a best on best tournament. Like, and they're going to try and take that away from, you know, Finland. But, you know, this was an incredible accomplishment. And you're right. The building blocks have been there for Finland to be a hockey powerhouse, you know, behind like right up there with, you know, USA, Canada, Russia. And Russia had a big leg up going into this because, like you said, they, you know, they have the KHL market is basically like right below the NHL in terms of, you know, skill and all of that stuff. So they were able to pull from a very high league. And Finland beat them. And it's a really awesome story. I hope nobody takes away their gold medal because it wasn't best on best, because it wasn't, you know, NHL players playing. These guys deserve the gold, and they had a really great tournament, and you can only be happy for them. Like, especially as an impartial observer here, as somebody who, you know, Canada or US wasn't in the gold medal final, like, it was a really awesome story. And, you know, it also feels nice because I know you, Andrew, are not a big fan that Russia or the athletes from Russia get to compete in the Olympics, even though they should have been banned. But, you know, it also must be nice to, you know, take it to Russia and take it to, you know, a team that has a bunch of professionals playing and stuff like that. So it's a really cool moment. Finland had a great Olympics overall between winning gold and then bronze in the women's tournament. So definitely huge winners here. Like, it's just a great story, and I'm happy to see it. I'm definitely not going to be taking this medal away from them because, you know, they performed really well in the tournament, and, you know, even if it wasn't best on best, this was still the tournament that was here, and it was great to watch.
Yeah, and I think the only time that I would ever take a medal away, like, obviously you can't actually take it away, but say, like, it doesn't really count is if Russia won in this tournament, because they are by far the favorites. They have the players that are available. Like, it's shocking actually how few Russians there are in the NHL nowadays. Like, they do a good job in Russia of keeping not necessarily their highest end players, but overall a lot of players in Russia. There have only been 45 Russian players who've played in the NHL at all this year. And a good chunk of those, about 12 of those, have only played a handful of games. So overall, just not the presence that they used to have in the league. And Russia has made it a very stated goal to keep their best players home. Obviously, they can't keep like the Ovechkins at home, but they keep some good talent at home. And
I also think it helps that like the pandemic probably is a big reason for that, in terms of like maybe some people that aren't, like that aren't the Ovechkins, the Kaprizovs and stuff like that, like aren't like the highest talent that would, be superstars. Maybe it helps keep them in Russia. Maybe they get also paid more too. So there's a lot of different factors here, I think, for the reason why, Russia has, or at least the KHL has a high retention rate in terms of, keeping Russian athletes in Russia. But, if you're extremely talented, you will move to the NHL because the money is going to be there. But, if you're more of like a middle player, you might get more money being the top player in the KHL rather than being a middle player in the NHL. So there's a lot of different factors here, but it's just interesting how it all lines up. And I'm pretty sure Russia also won in Pyeongchang in 2018, if I
they did,
remember correctly. Okay, good.
Yeah, they
Good to
beat
know.
Germany. They almost lost, actually. Germany
Yeah,
just
I
had
remember.
such a gutsy effort.
Oh,
But yeah, I
so
think
sad
the
Germany
main
didn't
thing
win
is
that.
like one of the things that I thought was kind of funny as a takeaway from this was Vladislav Tretiak, who famed Russian goaltender from the 70s and 80s. Some people will still argue is the greatest goalie of all time. Talked about how in Russia and hockey always expect to be gold. And I was like, listen, I understand the sentiment, but the last time that Russia won a best on best hockey tournament was in the 1980s. Like, they are a strong hockey country, but they're not in the top tier anymore. And they haven't been for a very long time. And we can talk about if that's coaching or if that was goaltending for a time when it seemed like goaltending's always failed them. The fact is, they haven't done it. They've only won in tournaments where they had a ridiculous advantage, or like the World Championships, which is not best on best. Russia can claim all they want that they're a great hockey country, but they are not on par with Canada or Sweden, or frankly, even the United States, who won in 1996.
I think if we saw a best on best tournament this year, I think Russia would be pretty close. I mean, you've got Igor Shesterkin in net, who is Russian,
or
right?
Vasilevsky.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the lack of best on best is hurting them because there's a lot. I think they've raised their floor in terms of where they were to where they currently are, because now they have some really good goalies that I don't think we've seen in the Olympics. We haven't seen, obviously, Shesterkin, or I don't think we've seen Vasilevsky either, because it's been a very long time since the NHL was last in the Olympics, and he's only really risen to prominence more recently. So yeah, I think that, especially with the goaltending floor being raised in Russia, I think that they'd maybe stand a bit more chance.
You know where their weakness is now, though? Defense.
Mm-hmm.
They have decent defensemen like Dmitry Orlov, Mikhail Sergachev, Ivan Provorov, but overall, do they have any stars? No. I mean, the years of like Andrei Markov and Sergei Gonchar are gone. Sergei Zubov, long retired, and it seems like they haven't been able to rebuild that part. So it's like the goaltending has come up, the defense has come down. The forwards are always decent, but I feel like it's always like top heavy, and then the depth guys aren't the best. So I don't know. I don't think Russia is the hockey power that they think they are. I think if you build the rosters side by side, you look at like Sweden, Canada, USA, even Finland is probably now either on par or ahead of Russia in a best on best tournament. And that's why every time Russia gets like super cocky about hockey, I'm like, you don't win anything that actually matters, guys. Like, turn off the cockiness. Get out of here. Beat Canada one time. All right. So that's my Canadian coming out. But we'll wrap it up there on that, and we'll move forward, getting to the NHL stuff, because there's a fair amount of stuff to talk about, and it's kind of fun. But first, I got to tell you about Bet Online. Football might be over this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. Ooh, that's right. We're about to head into March Madness, Mary. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where the next fired coach is going to land, betonline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today and use your mobile device and learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Mary. So as you know, I follow the Montreal Canadiens professionally. I do a recap of every single game on the Steve Dzingel podcast network called Game Over Montreal. Over the course of February, though, because of the Olympics, Julian McKenzie's been filling in for me on the weekends, so I haven't been there every time. But one thing I have noticed is Cole Caufield's back. The guy that we watched in the playoffs has suddenly returned with the departure of head coach Dominique Ducharme and the incoming Martin St. Louis. Now, Caufield said when the coaching hire was made that when he was a kid, he wore number 26 with St. Louis in mind, essentially. St. Louis was like his inspiration. And people went out and found video of him at like 7 years old wearing number 26. And he's only grown about a foot. But it's true. He definitely wore number 26. He wasn't just blowing smoke. And the change in his game, the confidence he's playing with is so palpable. And like, I remember a couple weeks ago before this change happened, and people were kind of like really starting to worry about one goal this season, things not working out for him. Like, is Cole Caufield ruined? And I looked back and watched some highlights from last year's playoffs, and I was like, I'm not worried. That player is there. He just needs a little bit of confidence, a little pep in his step. And all of a sudden, he's got it. And now people are like, can he score 20 goals in the final 30 games of the season? Like, it's like the shift in fan base expectations has changed immediately because it's just this little week and a half stretch of him being excellent. And people have remembered how fun he is and how we were all penciling him in for the American Olympic team heading into the season.
Yeah, it's nice to see him, as you said, get pep in his step back. Because, I mean, there has been a black hole around the Canadiens this season. And as you know so well, I'm basically preaching to the choir, essentially,
yes.
here. So we all know how bad the Canadiens have been. And it has been sad to see that Caufield hasn't really, broken out, lived up to, I think, maybe too lofty expectations, considering where this team started, ended last year and was heading into this year. But still, he was underperforming. The whole team was underperforming. It wasn't great. It was very bad. Everybody was having a bad time in Montreal and covering the Canadiens and watching them. But it's really great to see Caufield, come back into his own. He's had, I believe, 4 goals and 5 points his last 5 games, at least coming into Monday, as far as I'm aware. So he's, it's, as you said, it's like a stretch of a week and a half, but it's still really, it's nice to see. It's encouraging to see, because there were some people that doubted it, doubted that this was the player. I didn't. It just, when everything goes wrong like this, it just brings everybody down. You're not really going to get a standout player for the most part in a season that miserable. It just usually that type of misery brings everybody down. And, the room isn't fun. It's not fun to play hockey. I mean, we've seen it with, players like Ryan O'Reilly, who, when he left Buffalo, he had said that, it made him, his time in Buffalo made him want to stop playing hockey. So, a losing locker room isn't, the best in terms of, culture, keeping people's confidence high. So it's great that it seems like Martin St. Louis' voice is even though the Canadiens have still been losing, because they're just that bad in terms of the players they have assembled on their roster, at least their attitude seems to be shifting around. And it's really shown itself in Caufield, and whether that's just because he's an incredible player, and he is, or, he's playing for his, somebody he idolized growing up. there's a spark there, and it's really great to see because Caufield is such an electric player and he's so fun. And I want him to succeed because, it's nice to have, a crop of new stars in the NHL, and Caufield is one of them. And, if the Canadiens can get going and turn things around in the future, more Caufield in the playoffs is always a good thing, in my opinion. But, this is all good signs for Montreal. And I think we're going to transition to talking about what Martin St. Louis has done for this team, because, like I said, even though the Canadiens are losing, there seems to be a shift in, things, the way they're approaching things, how they're talking, like their mentality, which is, all good things. And you had even mentioned coming into, like, right after he got hired, he said some really encouraging things that were, not something you hear from an interim head coach or even just a head coach in general in this league. And I really think that's rubbing off on the players. Obviously, they're too far gone in this season, but they can use these as building blocks to move forward. And who knows if, the interim tag will come off of St. Louis at the end of the season. We never know. You don't know, but it's still really awesome.
It's pretty much guaranteed that the interim tag is coming off. Basically, on everything that's been reported, the understanding going in was that unless things went like really poorly, the interim tag was coming off. So
all right, that's good.
He'll be back,
and I think that's good. I think that's really good for the Canadiens overall. Just like I said, the way he's transformed this team and the really encouraging things he said in his press conference, he seems to be backing them up, at least from what I've seen, anyway.
Yes, and the fact is, even though the Canadiens are not, amazing, they actually have won twice in a row now for the first time this season. It took until game 50.
God.
So back-to-back wins heading into Toronto tonight. So when you hear this, it might even be 3 straight wins. You don't know. The last time that the Maple Leafs came into Montreal, they were expected to win as well, and then they lost in overtime. So they haven't won in regulation yet under St. Louis, but they've won in overtime and in a shootout on, I guess, Sunday afternoon, against Long Island in Long Island. So they've won at home and on the road. Second half of a back-to-back tonight in Montreal against Toronto. But Caufield has been instrumental in both games. Against St. Louis, they scored a crazy goal with just over a minute left to make it 2-1. And everyone just basically threw in the towel and thought that the Canadiens were going to lose. All of a sudden, Cole Caufield ties it up. And then in overtime, Jeff Petrie to Cole Caufield wins it. So Cole Caufield's resurgence has been an absolutely massive story for the Montreal Canadiens. And I know there are some people who want them to just keep on losing for the draft pick, but let's keep some perspective here that even if the Canadiens do some winning through the last, I guess they've got 32 games left, 31 when you listen to this because they'll play Toronto, they're at 27 points this season. 3 points behind Arizona. So they could theoretically catch Arizona. But they're, 9 points behind Seattle? At this stage in the season, making up 9 points is a lot. So it's very, very unlikely that they finish any higher than second last in the league or third last in the league. And yes, you want that first overall pick, but the top 2 or 3 players are not necessarily that far apart in this year's draft. There's a bit of separation between Shane Wright and the next 2, but there's good players at the top of this draft class. So, and by the way, finishing last does not guarantee you that you picked first overall.
I was going to say.
Just ask the Detroit Red Wings.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of value, I think, in getting something going, getting some mojo going to end this season and having players like Cole Caufield light it up, have Nick Suzuki look offensively like we expect him to. There's a lot of value in that going forward and building things for the team, because when you're just bad forever, you do get people like Ryan O'Reilly who just want to quit. And there have been players on this team this year that looked like they just want to throw in the towel. You look at Jeff Petrie before the coaching change. He kind of looked like that. He's been a little bit rejuvenated now, but overall, you need players to buy in a little bit, especially if you want to not blow up the team down to the last man, essentially.
And also, this is good in terms of if they start to play better before the trade deadline, that you
get better returns.
You get better returns. You boost your trade stock. So there they were on the track to be historically bad this season. I don't know what it's like
still are.
now. Okay, they still are, but like it was. I mean, you said it. It was an embarrassment of, just it was terrible play. It was really demoralizing to watch, and not what you want to see from an NHL team. So I'm glad that they've turned it around at least, mentally. They're still going to keep losing. Like I said, the Canadiens aren't going to, go on a complete tear out here, and like they're too far gone. But as long as the mentality shifts, and they have some building blocks, to continue on into the future with this team, they're headed in the right direction, which is nice. We'll see what happens, as we get closer to the trade deadline. More if like how many more players move, because we already saw Tyler Toffoli move, and he's made an impact already with Calgary. So we'll see what happens as we get closer to the trade deadline, and then what's left for this Canadiens team in terms of where they have to go from here to build for the future, because they've lost a lot of players. They lost a lot of players going into the season. They're probably going to lose a few more in the season. We don't know if Carey Price is going to play again. Shea Weber probably not going to play again. So there's going to be a lot this team needs to, do and, build upon. So at least getting out from this terrible losing mentality will at least set them right for the future. So yeah, it's
100%.
And it's great that, like, going back to the beginning, it's great that Cole Caufield is, having his moment, because there haven't been a lot of really fun, positive stories around the Canadiens this year, and this is one of the nice ones to be like, hey, good for you, Montreal. You may not be winning, but at least Cole Caufield is still a really awesome player. So I'm very sad that the Flyers didn't get to that. The Flyers passed over him in that draft, because it's kind of a player that they need, but it is what it is. I'm just happy, though, overall, that Montreal seems to be turning the corner mentally and is setting themselves up for whatever they do in the future. They're at least setting themselves up to have a good base. It's not going to be completely miserable there.
Yeah. And speaking of the Flyers, coming up next, is Claude Giroux going to get traded? Well, we'll talk about that maybe, but we've got some trades to talk about as we get inches closer to the trade deadline and some moves start to get made. But before we talk about that, I've got to talk to you about Built Bar, because you need to get some energy to last until the trade deadline. This is the time of the year when I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution, because I actually do enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. The alliteration, they love it at Built Bar. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. And they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors. Yummy cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. So good. These are going to be your new favorite. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, Puffs included, 100% real chocolate. Low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with these. They're better. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. Go to built.com and scroll down to the macros chart. You'll be blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to your candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Mint brownie, coconut almond, and new for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. They're all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. If they think a flavor might be good, they'll make it. It'll be delicious, and it'll be good for you. At Built Bar, they're all about the taste. They make them taste delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy. I don't know how, but they pull it off every time. Go to built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your first order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. So, Mary, The trades are finally happening. We had Tyler Toffoli last week, and now we've got the Maple Leafs trading Nick Ritchie to Arizona for Ryan Dzingel and Ilya Lyubushkin, which is an interesting trade for a variety of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle Dubas has been kind of under fire this year as GM in Toronto, and I think it's understandable because of the first round frustrations, and they want the Leafs to just do everything and get through, but until we get to the playoffs, we don't know if things worked or not, right? So what we can say is that once again, they are an excellent regular season team, and there was a lot of frustration about the contract handed out to Nick Ritchie during the season because he just has not worked out in Toronto at all. But going back to the summer, like, everybody liked this deal. It was very rare that people to find somebody who didn't like this deal. Nick Ritchie is a better player than what he's been this year. And, maybe he's fallen off the cliff. We don't know. But I think that he just didn't fit in Toronto for whatever reason. And the fact is, the Leafs made 3 bets at forward in the summer to essentially sign guys for relatively low amounts to fill in for the players who had left in the offseason. They lost Zach Hyman, very important player for them. So they brought in Bunting, they brought in Andre Kasha, and they brought in Nick Ritchie. Sorry, just blanked on it. I almost said Robert Ritchie. I think that was a defenseman back in the day. Anyway, Ritchie didn't work out, but Bunting has been absolutely incredible. And Andre Kasha has made their third line an incredible offensive threat while playing excellent minutes on the PK. Like, to get 2 out of 3 of those be full-on home runs, I feel like you have to accept the bad. And also, Ilya Lyubushkin, who is a pretty solid defensive defenseman, they traded Ritchie without retaining any salary. And then they brought in a thing that they actually needed in the process, waived Ryan Dzingel, who will either go to the minors or be claimed. And they essentially got rid of a problem, found a solution, and Dubas gets to clean his hands of it. I just can't see any way to crap on this deal. I feel like this is brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Ritchie did not work out in Toronto. And we don't know, like you said, we don't know if he's fallen off a cliff. He didn't work in the system. Like, if it's hard to say, and we won't, really know until we see how he performs with this new team. But, I get the frustration from Toronto fans because, you can be as good as whatever in the regular season, and then it doesn't matter if you lose out in the playoffs. Tell that to the Tampa Bay Lightning, however many years ago, who had their historic regular season and then got swept by Columbus. So you can do whatever in the regular season, and it doesn't matter until you hit the playoffs. But I think this is a really good move. Like you said, I have a hard time criticizing Kyle Dubas here because they, like you said, got rid of a problem and then added a player who could very well be the solution to one of their problems, which is they need defensive defensemen. They need, somebody to be stronger, like strong in front of the net, stuff like that. They need, I don't want to say they need a bit more grit and snarl when they have Wayne Simmons on the team, but like they need a bit more of that, it seems. And somebody like that plays a defensive role like that can qualify. I haven't seen much of his play before, but everything that I've heard seems like he would be a very good fit for what Toronto needs. And I mean, we'll see how things play out. Montreal isn't not Montreal, geez. Toronto isn't done making moves. I don't think anyway. I think there's still opportunities for them to add, and I don't think a GM like Kyle Dubas will sit and wait to see how things go. We still have a month to the trade deadline. Toronto's still going to be active. They are really looking this year to finally get over the hump and, win a playoff round. And it almost feels like this is the year or things actually blow up this year if things don't work out. So I think that the Maple Leafs need to continue to, make savvy moves like this. They don't need to be huge home run heavy hitters, but they need to be players that they think work in their system. I know that the, big flashy names are what will get all the, headlines and stuff like that. But, sometimes, trade deadline acquisitions that are a bit more under the radar can be the best ones. So, I mean, they got, who was it last year at the deadline? Nick Foligno. And that was
Yeah,
one of
and
the
they
big.
overpaid for him like crazy.
Yeah, I did not like that deal. I didn't like what he brought to, um, the Toronto system. And then unfortunately he got injured. But they overpaid for him, and he was a big name, one of the biggest on the trade board. And it didn't work out. So I would hope Kyle Dubas learned his lesson, and it seems like so far the moves that they've made are, taking that track more of trying to, like, not necessarily going after the big name. Sure, if there's somebody that can make their team even better, uh, like, you do that trade, but risking like having like spending a lot for a player like Nick Foligno. I still can't get over that deal. I still don't understand why they made it. And I know that the real reason why it was bad was because he was injured and hardly played. But I still didn't think that was a good fit at all for that team. And especially because they gave up so much. But we're not here to rehash deadline deals that they made last year, because this is a new deadline. There's a lot more to do. We've barely even begun, it seems. With trades, because you're right. Usually the trade deadline is either end of February, early March. So we have a couple more weeks of stuff to do before we get to the trade deadline. So we'll see how that impacts teams. Will they be, antsier to make deals? Will there be more deals? It's hard to say, but there's already some movement. So it's clear teams, especially Dubas, wants to get a jump ahead and, figure out what their team is going to look like come playoff time.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I feel like from the Arizona perspective, I was wondering why they made this deal, because they, like, from the salary cap, they're actually taking on a little bit more, tiny bit more. But Nick Ritchie is also owed $3.3 million next year. Like, his salary this year is actually quite low. So my thought is that because Arizona is so cash poor, and because they are so like ready and willing to tear everything down to trade everyone, I think they're going to play Ritchie on like the top line from here until the deadline and try to flip him. Because I don't think they want any part of paying him $3.3 million next year.
I mean, yeah,
I think they just don't want contracts where the dollar amount is worth more than the cap hit.
If he rebounds, I mean, he could be, a reasonable asset to flip. Like, I can absolutely see that being the case. It just
Solid net
depends
front
on
presence. He's got some goal scoring ability.
It just depends on how he performs. And I mean, trying to go from, like, if he's not performing on Toronto, who is a great team, and moving to Arizona, who is not a great team, but you never know. Change of pace, change of scenery can do players good, even if the team that they move to is bad. So we'll see. I feel bad for Ritchie, because isn't he a local Toronto kid? Like, isn't he from Toronto, or at least grew up around that area? So
yeah,
I know
he's
that's
from Orangeville, Ontario, so it's around there. Yeah.
Okay, but still, like, it's a big thing. I know it's a big thing for people. You saw it with Tavares, that going home to play in Toronto is a big factor for a lot of people and a big point of pride. So I feel bad in the sense that Ritchie couldn't put it together for a team he may have grown up liking. I obviously don't know him personally, but that is my guess when you hear about local people that play for the teams that they grew up around. So, but I hope he gets a fresh start, and maybe he gets flipped to a contender, and maybe he'll in the end face the Maple Leafs.
Oh God,
please. Wouldn't that be a story?
Oh my
God,
yes.
I think that's kind of what we all want to root for here, is Ritchie does well, then gets flipped to, I don't know.
You're evil, Mary.
I don't know. Florida? I mean,
It'd
Florida.
have to be likely Tampa Bay, I think, is who they're going to face in the first round. So Tampa Bay taking a flyer on him would be very interesting.
Yeah, and that is something that that they could do, because they have such savvy cap management. So we'll see. I don't think that's going to happen. But you never know with the NHL. It would be very Toronto Maple Leafs if they face Nick Ritchie in the first round. So
100%. And now this is probably all we have to say about that trade. And I know we're excited for other trades. But before we conclude the hockey stuff, I just want to mention something. I don't know if you'd seen it going around, Mary, but because we are both from the Canadiens perspective and the Flyers perspective, I have to mention former Canadian and former Flyer Ryan White, people in his life put out a GoFundMe, which already has doubled the asking amount. So I guess you don't really need to donate. I mean, you can if you still want, but they were looking for $60,000, and they've already received 136, with many former and current NHLers donating, along with fans. Over 750 people have donated at this point. But unfortunately, Ryan and his wife Sarah's oldest child, Gordy, was diagnosed with an incurable brain tumor with a apparently 0% survival rate. So he's only 3.5 years old. So maybe keep an eye on this situation if they need some more support. We'll put the link to the GoFundMe in the podcast description just so you can have it. But extremely sad situation there. Like, as a parent of young children, reading it, like it's just stuck with me the whole time. I can't stop thinking about it, because just having that future written for you over the head of your own child who's barely had a chance to live in the world, I just can't imagine it. So my thoughts go out to Ryan and Sarah White, who are dealing with something that nobody should ever have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, being a parent changes you. While you were saying that, I was thinking that, and then I was like, you're the parent of a kid, I'm the parent of a cat. It's definitely the same. But like, no. Like, obviously it is not the same. But like, I was like, man, it does, like, thinking about something happening to somebody that's in your care is a terrifying thought. So yeah, we'll definitely post the link in our podcast notes description, whatever it's called. And yeah, if you can support, definitely support, because you need all the well wishes, support that they can get. So
yeah, they're just trying to extend the young boy's life and be able to spend as much time with him as possible, which I couldn't possibly identify with more. It's the only thing that you can think about in that situation, and I'm glad that the hockey community has rallied around them, because it's only been a day, I think, since this has come out, and they've already doubled what their stated goal is. It's pretty incredible. But yeah, check it out, and keep an eye on the situation in case things change. Maybe they might need more support if it's not necessarily to donate right now. But yeah, check it out, read what's going on, and understand it. All right, we're going to take a hard left turn here and tell you about Rock Auto, because this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts that you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing only the brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, or even 100% more for the same parts from the chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is also a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, so they care about their customers. This is a personal thing for them. They're not a faceless corporation. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer, whether it's do-it-yourselfers or a professional mechanic. Go explore their easy-to-use website today and find your solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts that your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, Mary, so it's time for the Pop Culture Roulette segment, and I know that you got to play Horizon Forbidden West. I know that you've been itching to play it for so long, so tell us, is it as amazing as you assumed it would be?
yes, it is everything I wanted it to be. I'm not going to spoil anything because it goes hard in its first. I don't even know where I'm at in terms of the story, but in the first like act, I guessed I'm probably not even a third of the way through the story if I had to guess, or about there. It goes hard, and it goes to places I was hoping it would go. In terms of things that they sprinkled throughout the lore and stuff like that. But the game is gorgeous, I think, is like the biggest takeaway. Not only is I play on PlayStation 5 because I was very lucky to get a PlayStation 5 basically a year and a couple months back. So I basically got it specifically so I could play this game whenever it came out. And boy, is it gorgeous on PlayStation 5. The environments are incredible, but specifically the like character animations and facial animations. Everybody's so like well animated in this game. I'm having a hard time paying attention to the subtitles because all I'm doing is watching the characters move, which is a very strange thing for me that usually doesn't happen in a video game. It happened a little bit with Final Fantasy VII Remake because the characters there were also very like not lifelike, but like they like acted and emoted like real people and stuff like that. So that's one of the biggest things I can say about this game is it's gorgeous, and I'm having trouble paying attention to, when people talk, because it's not just like the main quest that's got these really great character animations. It's all the side quests too. Like characters you only see for like a handful of minutes when you're doing a quest, they're animated like fully and completely, and the detail is gorgeous. Like I can't, like I can only say good things about the way this game looks because it is wonderful to look at, and it's really awesome, and it feels great. It feels like a natural extension of the first game in terms of like the mechanics and stuff like that. So it's everything I've wanted it to be so far. I'm sad that I have to rejoin the real world and do work and do my livelihood because all I want to do is play this video game. But I think it's good that I got a whole bunch of stuff done. Like I said, I'm probably about a third of the way through the game, at least narratively. I'm taking my time, like seeing stuff in the map. It's one of those games where like certain areas of the map you can only access later once you've gotten certain tools. It's definitely a game I'm going to be sinking a lot of hours into even after I complete the story because I want to see all of like the collectibles and stuff. And usually I'm not like a big collectibles person in open worlds. There's a point where I usually get burnt out on it, but I've always found that the Horizon games have done a really good job of like they're really unique collectibles, and there's like different ones, but it's not overkill basically. So I'm having a fantastic time. If you liked the first one even a little bit, Horizon Forbidden West is a marginal improvement over everything from the first game, and it's really great. I'm really happy. And then of course, once I beat that game, we'll have Elden Ring later this week, which I don't think I'm going to get to for another couple of weeks, depending on how long it takes me to beat and complete this game to the way I want it to be. But it's a really good time for video games because Horizon Forbidden West is an incredible PlayStation 5 showcase, and it actually even works well on PlayStation 4 too. It's a cross-gen game. I know a few people are playing it on PlayStation 4, and it may not look as pretty, but the game still runs really well on PlayStation 4. So definitely check it out if you played the first one, and even some things you were like, I don't necessarily like this. They probably changed it because it is just an incredible showcase, and I'm so happy because it's lived up to everything I've wanted it to be and more.
That's fun. I mean,
what about
anytime a game can actually live up to expectations, it's always like sequels of universally loved games have very big shoes to fill because the gaming community is not kind when things don't
and I mean,
fit into their expectations.
The game isn't perfect, but people always like, it's funny. The first game came out right before Breath of the Wild, and then Breath of the Wild changed the open world landscape forever now. It still holds onto the same open world trapping. So if you played Breath of the Wild and you're like, I can't play open world games again because Breath of the Wild ruined it for me. I need to have these traversal mechanics. I need to have this open-ended freedom. It's not going to be a game for you because it is very like, it's a really, really, really well-crafted open world, but it has like, if open world games aren't for you, it's not going to be a game for you, but it's gorgeously crafted, wonderfully like lived in. It's great. And it's a wild step up from the first game because the first game was still really, really good. It was one of my favorite games of the PlayStation 4 generation, but it's wild how you look at those two games and they're like, they completely knocked it out of the park on the things it does really well. So like, no game is perfect, but I'm really enjoying it. And I can't stop talking about this game, and I want to talk more about the plot and stuff, but I won't because that'll be for a long time down the road. But I'm really enjoying it. So Andrew, what have you done with your weekends? Because I feel like I've talked enough about video games.
Yeah, I haven't had a ton of time to watch a bunch of stuff, but I did get a chance to check out my friend Jay Baruchel, friend of the podcast, Jay Baruchel's new show on Prime, which is called Last One Laugh in Canada, which I believe comes from UK. I think they did it first, and Australia's already done this as well. But essentially, it is 10 comedians, like 10 iconic comedians from Canada, in a room, and they have to try to make each other laugh.
Okay.
And if you laugh, the first time you get a yellow card, and the second time you get a red card, and you're out.
Ooh, so like soccer or football, if you were in the
Yes,
UK.
essentially, yeah. And so it's very, very interesting. And I don't know how much different Canadian comedians cross borders, but I know like Americans mostly know who Colin Mockery is from Whose Line Is It Anyway? He's in it, internationally recognized improv guy. Tom Green is in it. It's been a while since I've seen Tom Green in anything, but Tom Green was like my childhood, and I feel like people don't put enough respect on Tom Green's name. A lot of the stuff that's out there today would not exist without Tom Green. Like, I love Eric Andre. Eric Andre would not exist today without Tom Green. Every prank show, the genesis can be traced back to Tom Green. Like, everything that they do, Punk'd, all that came from Tom Green. He's the one who set the table. Jackass, all that stuff, Tom Green did it first. And he is the most effortlessly funny person by just making mundane things weird and stupid. There's a point in the second episode where he just talks about how he's making grilled cheese sandwiches, and he keeps on telling everybody that he's making delicious cheese sandwiches, and he says it over and over again, and everybody in the room is trying so hard not to lose it. One of the comedians literally starts crying to stop herself physically from laughing. It's fantastic, and you can tell that Jay is having a absolute blast doing it because he's acting as himself, like completely uncensored and exactly how he is in real life. So it's really, really fun to watch. And yeah, I am really enjoying it. There's only 2 episodes out so far. It's coming out weekly on, I think, Fridays. So if you have Amazon Prime, definitely check out that series.
Yeah, that seems fun. And also on Amazon Prime is The Legend of Vox Machina, which just wrapped up its first season, which is Critical Role's animated show of parts of the first campaign. So that also came out last week. It's been a very busy week. I may have talked about that last week, but all of my hype was leading into video games. But that's really awesome, and obviously friend of the show, Jay Baruchel. So you've got to check it out, guys. Come on.
100%. You got to rep. All right, that's all we have for you today on the Cross-Check NHL show. Thanks for listening and making us your first listen every Tuesday and Friday. Those are the days the show comes out. Now make your next episode, or your second listen, Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Hosts Steel Roden and Flip Livingstone help you become the expert of your fantasy league. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts.